walking, and there was a moose, and its shoulders were above the what was the cattle? The Escalade were above the Escalade, and I was like, "What?" I had never seen that mess. So
It's no joke.
we're
No
here,
joke.
and today has been a big day. And like even Blockchain Beardsley, the Blockchain Beard influencer dude, he had like an emergency live, and Aussie was hollering at emergency lives, and so we got a lot to talk about. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the Apple Headset Pro, which I believe
let's go. Let's go.
is pure trash.
Let's go, Grant. Let's go.
Oh my God.
So, Grant, is that all you have to say? You think it's pure trash? Actually, Aussie, I think you're going to be the rep.
I've got more to it. I just wanted to drop that chum in the water because I was around. Sorry, that's Google. I was around when Google launched Google Glass. And I was in love with Google Glass. And Google Glass was actually a phenomenal product. And at the time, it was $1,200. And I deliberated as, am I going to buy Google Glass or am I going to buy that much Google stock? Well, I ended up buying Google stock. And it did very finely for us. It split, I think, twice in that period of time. And we did pretty good with that. But I loved the product, and it was minimalist. But the public reaction to this was so vehement that it was nuts. It was out of control. So I see the Apple ski goggles, and I go, no one's going to wear these out. But if you watch the video, they do start setting the expectation. This is likely like an augmented reality for mostly the office and home. And I'm like, okay, that's good context, and it's interactive there. But then I'm like, wait a minute. It needs, I believe, it needs your Mac computer. So you've already spent money on your Mac setup and your software. Then on top of that, meaning for syncing and stuff, like it does its own standalone thing. And yes, it has its own computational engine and this space engineering that they're calling it. But the syncing looks like it needs your setup. Like I couldn't be a non-Mac user and then go get a headset and now be a Mac user. Like I still have to get my whole stack. And then on top of that, it's $3,500. So it's called Pro for a reason. So I'm thinking, what mother effer is out here to get this as like an accessory to standard computing? I thought what was cool was the dial where you could go opaque with the dial. I thought that was cool. I thought that the idea of a lot of what they pitch is good, but I don't think the public they're building a solution to a problem or desire people don't have. And so I do believe the headlines are right. This is the biggest airdrop for Apple since 2000, iPhone 7. You are 100% correct, and that is trash. That this is the best thing you've done since iPhone 7. I love the PowerPoint and the video, but in actual execution, I believe people are we haven't solved for dizziness. We haven't solved for nausea. We haven't solved for total immersion environment. So that's my take. Jarrett, you're smirking already. So go.
I want to hear. Let's hear what.
No. Why don't you go, and then you both are going to sit down, okay? So why don't you go, Aussie? You tell me about how it's too expensive, and then I'll go, okay? This is cute. I love this.
I think expensive at $3,500 because, I mean, I can buy 3 iPhones for that price.
It's true.
I can buy 3 iPhones for that price. The other big thing is, I think, if we think about its use case, it's just not there yet. I want to see it once we've got gaming that can integrate properly with it, then maybe that's interesting. But Apple is not the gaming software. Most games go to iOS after when it comes to AAA gaming. They go
so
to
they have
iOS
to fire
after.
up their whole gaming arm again to get real time or get at least decently timed games. Interesting.
Yeah. So you would have to essentially, that's where I think some of the big stuff, interesting use case would be, but they're not gaming. They're not a leader in gaming. Some games don't release on Apple till 3 years after the game pre-releases on Android or on Windows. So to me, That's kind of the big drawback of what I'm seeing. Do I think it's really cool? Do I think it's a huge evolution of tech? Yes, but I think Apple needs to get out of their Apple exclusivity for this to really make an impact.
Yeah. Okay, Jarrett. What you got?
You guys are so cute. I love it. First and foremost, I want to shout out. You guys are being cute today. It's nice. First and foremost, I want to shout out everyone in the comments. We got Brian saying starting at 3,500. George said, "What's up? What's up? What's up?" Tristan Peters says, "Worth every penny." Got right underneath Grant's fingernails. Tristan Peters says, "Get out of here with that." Oh, no, Grant says, "Get out of here with that." Jessica Ojeda, yes, it's about to happen. Cough, ridiculous. Yeah, George says, "I want an AR phone. That's it. Forget the games. I don't want that type anymore or hype anymore." I think is what he was going. Google Glass knockoff. Okay, so here we go, guys. One of the geniuses behind Steve Jobs is he was able to create things that we didn't even know we wanted until we saw them, or we were like presented with them. Okay, so when the iPhone comes out in 2007, BlackBerry has 45% of the smartphone, or the overall phone marketplace. Okay, and if we remember BlackBerry, it was not the iPhone, right? It didn't have a touch screen. It had that little cursor thing. You had all your buttons. So then the iPhone comes out, and I remember very vividly. I'm going to talk for a while. So you guys just, if you have things to do, you want to do your taxes, that's fine. Go ahead and do them. So I remember very vividly the iPhone when it came out. It came out in 2007 in the fall, and I remember like hearing about it, and I was like, oh, that's dumb. I don't want that. I'll never use that. That's silly. Why would I want that? Then fast forward, it's February of 2008, and I'm in Buenos Aires, and I'm sitting at a bar by myself watching a soccer game. And this kid sits down next to me. As I do. And this kid sits down next to me, and I'll never forget this to the day. I was telling my roommate about this anecdote last night. He sits down, and he has the iPhone. And picture this. I'm studying abroad. I have a little Nokia. Hey, Torben, what's up? I have a little Nokia, the little cell thing that, all I can do is play Snake on. And he sits down, and he takes the iPhone. Maybe you guys can hear it. He just goes, and it makes this noise because it had that metal back at the time. It had the metal rounded back. It was the iPhone 1. And he says to me, and we start talking, and he looks at me, and I think he's from England. I was 20 years old at the time. He was 19. He looks at me, he goes, "Can you believe it? I have been I was just at another bar, sat there for 3 hours and had the iPhone out and had it on the bar." And he said to me, "No girls spoke to me." That's what he said to me, and I'll never forget it because I didn't understand what he was trying to say to me. Because for me, the iPhone wasn't impressive. For me, the iPhone wasn't a social signaling. For me, the iPhone wasn't this exclusive club. For me, the iPhone wasn't this new tech that was going to allow him to be in a world that I don't have access to, which was the iPhone, and which was all the things that you can get through the iPhone at that time. And even now, there's certain things you can't get on the iPhone. Okay. So fast forward to now, I feel the exact same way about this, in the sense that I think this is another thing that maybe we don't know we want until we kind of have seen it. And now we're like, oh, the possibilities seem limitless in some sense. I also think they're the first one through the door on this high level of AR. Now, Oculus has had VR since 2014. I think they were bought for $2 billion in 2015 or 2017. I always get this wrong, but I think it's 2015 by Facebook. Yeah, they were bought by Facebook for $2 billion or acquired. And Oculus has been focusing on VR. But Apple is, for me, I think one of the biggest players to go into AR. Now, there's Samsung and there's other things that have kind of come along. But I guess my point is, this is such a big moment for tech hardware. And it's like one of the biggest first leaps. Because I think in 2020 and 2021, maybe like some of you guys, I figured, oh, we're just going to go right into virtual spaces. I got the Oculus. I was all in. I was doing all this stuff in the Oculus. But like Grant says, I was getting dizzy. I would wear it for 30 minutes and then have to take it off and have a headache I couldn't shake for hours. Honestly, I'd have to lay down. I'd have to drink water. I don't ever suffer from any nausea or any dizziness. I can go on a boat. I can go on a plane. I can go on a roller coaster. So it was a weird experience for me to have that. Apple, the Oculus, I paid about $550 because I got all the bells and whistles. Apple comes out, this thing's 7 times more, right?
Yeah.
This thing is going to change the way I think we understand communication and everything under the sun. I think it's totally worth its price point. I think obviously it's going to start here. And then I do think the price will become either the dollar will inflate, so it seems cheaper, or the price may come down. But, you know, when the iPhone came out, it was $500. And at that time, BlackBerry only had a $200 BlackBerry. And people cried, oh my God, that's too much money, right? But I also want to put this in context. I've seen people all day on Twitter talk about how it's so much money. And I love Brian Naughton's and Stars, you know, $3,500 starting. Okay, MFers. We spend that much money on JPEGs all the time and we don't blink and everyone thinks it's cool.
I don't play that much on JPEGs.
Maybe not you, Aussie, but I see
not.
people do it all the time. People are picking up Utes like it's fun these days and they're now at 2 ETH. So I think the price is just reflective of the paradigm shift that we're about to have and how we're all about to go into AR. And what I can say is I think we're going to start to see a lot of the NFT communities really start to update metadata and play around with their NFTs to be able to offer AR experiences. But for me, I think it's totally worth the value. I think they're going out on a limb and I think they're trying to do something crazy. I have no problem that, you know, you have to be an Apple person or whatever, but I want to say it does have an M1 chip. And this is what I wanted to call out. It does have like a pretty powerful processor. Sorry, it has an M2 chip and an R1 chip. So I think it can totally stand by itself. Now,
really,
the things I will say against it, however, are that it only has a 2-hour battery life, which is very, very, very weak unless you get an extra battery pack. But what that just tells me is that the hardware is so powerful and that they haven't come up with the battery solution, but they still wanted to get it out. My last thing is that I know someone who's part of the vision team at Apple, and we spoke last night for about 10 minutes because we wanted to talk about this. And I shot him a message about 6 weeks ago. I'm like, hey, so what's going on with the goggles? And he literally just said, I have no idea what you're talking about, because he's under NDA and he's like deep on this team. And, you know, he's like, we've been working on this for many years. You couldn't tell me how long, but he's like, this has been in the works for years. And I'm assuming 5 to 6 years, they've been trying to get out all the kinks. And one of the things that I will say about the product is that, and I tweeted this is one of those things, just like the iPhone when it came out, you thought you didn't need it, but I am betting that by 27 to 2028, people will have a version of this. Now, maybe they won't have the Apple because that's going to be the premier product and price point, but they'll have the Huawei or they'll have the Samsung or they'll have the Sony or they'll have whatever.
I think so.
But
I think that.
I still think this will be a premier product, just the way I believe in Mac products are premier products for me when it comes to tech. So that's that. Also, Grant, you don't like Apple, so you have to take that into account.
What's weird about this is I started my entire tech journey with a G1, G3 that I had to assemble myself. I started on Mac everything. And back then, it was premium, but the hardware itself was worth it. It was closer to, it was priced high, but it always seemed to match. And then the last product I had that I thought was amazing by Apple was an iPod Nano Shuffle. It had no screen on it. The best device I have ever owned technologically in my life. And I would have paid 10 times it because the UX was so intuitive. But I very quickly got the remote control on the Apple TV, and I'm like, this remote control, it is not intuitive, it makes no sense. And then I started seeing the rise of the cost of the laptops, and when I'd have the laptops and the plugs, and everything seemed to be partly thought through, and it was more about pizzazz, trying to mimic Steve Jobs. But Steve Jobs also forced his teams to build under the hood equitable to the packaging. It was both packaging and under the hood. And so then when you get, like, I saw someone post one of the Apple mouse things charging, and it was the silliest undesigned thing I've ever seen. And I've had this struggle with Apple that, you know what, they're just doing a greed grab. And they're making these things inaccessible. And I'm big on equanimity. I'm big on making sure that we have equality. I think you're right. I think it will set a consumer level tone, which is what premium products do. Tesla came out, it was roadsters only, it was premium people only, and I wanted one, right? The thing I'm most impressed with is the concept of in web design, we call it CSS. Basically, the UX UI coding of how the hand gestures actually are happening 3D. And I believe that sort of tech will make its way to web tech quickly, and I am excited about some of the new gestures. But I'm not going to pay $3,500. I'm not going to pay to be in Apple's ecosystem. For degens, I think it is the most disintegrated way to be as a degen to hold an iPhone and say you're about decentralization. Get the fuck out of here with this shit. If you believe in decentralization, go get, what do you got? What is
This is my iPhone, and I believe in decentralization.
Well, I know, and I think it's disintegrated. It's like it's the heart of centralization. Now, most of our phones, Androids, are they any less? Well, I can't port my stuff pretty easily. I think most Apple people struggle to port their stuff, but that neither here nor there. I see the $3,500, and I just think, you elitist pigs. And the idea that HoloLens, I dropped a link in here, HoloLens has been doing phenomenal stuff for years. This is just consumer ready. It does have a few very well thought out interfaces that I do respect. Again, the dial for the opacity, I think that's really nifty. I have to admit, if you're on an airplane and you just want to check out, that's brilliant. And then the idea that you could put a photo up there, the pinch zoom for the photos, and then if you choose to stand and walk into the photo then becomes its own virtual real environment. Those sorts of interactions are very, very impressive, and I can't wait for those sorts of things to hit other operating systems than Apple's. I do. I have a chip on my shoulder about closed source systems that go that far, where it's not only closed source, but I'm literally pricing as many Americans out of this as possible.
I just opened your HoloLens, and they have one for $5,100.
I see it.
Your price combo. I mean, look, the thing is,
it's a different target audience. Those are corporate enterprise audience. Like if you look at them, they're targeting corporations. Go ahead.
But that's how I feel about Apple tech anyways. Like I have a MacBook Air and I made an error there because I should have gotten a more powerful computer because of all the editing we're having to do now with podcasting and video and all this stuff. But like, Apple has the iPad for $700. You can get a little keyboard and the whole thing comes about $800, and it's pretty powerful. If you're going to check Facebook, put cat videos up on TikTok, and like gossip and like sell stuff on Facebook Marketplace, right? This is called Pro for a reason, and I do think that the price point is probably reflective. It has 2 chips. It has an M2 chip alone, which is probably worth $800. It has the other R1 chip, which is probably worth another $800. So they're also the first in the door, so they're going to get a lot of flack. But I'm just really excited for a year from now when motherfuckers have it. Everyone's going to have there will be one of these in every home in middle class, medium income earners around the world.
I agree.
Very, very, very soon. This is going to make the experience of looking at a flat screen super obsolete very, very quickly. And like you said, Grant, it's also the thing like the Roadster with the Tesla. It's going to be a thing of exclusivity, and it's going to be a thing of social signaling and being like, oh, wow, you have one of those at the house? Just like I remember back in the day when people I remember when N64 came out. I remember like it was yesterday because I couldn't get one. I remember when PlayStation 2 came out. I couldn't get one, and that was a social signaling. Oh, yeah, look at that. We have our and we have our N64, we have our PlayStation. When those came out, everyone said they were overpriced. Why would you pay $400 for them? And $400 back then is probably like $1,000 now. But kids got them at Christmas. $3,500. I know that we say it's a lot. Yeah. That's like the average 1-bedroom rent in Boston, and that is not hyperbole. Shit costs money. So like,
oh no, I mean that's.
I just think it's actually probably worth it
in Boston.
You guys need to come to Florida, people.
Okay, I'm paying less than $750 American in rent per month where I am for a 2-bedroom that's built in 2017.
Okay. Anyways.
No.
Canada. But let me get to my final point. And this Canada. My final point. This is what I said to my roommate here last night. I said, $3,500 is a lot of money. But just like when I got into Oculus, the thing I was most kind of impressed by is Oculus has its own ecosystem. And so if you're early there to these ecosystems, just like if you're early to Clubhouse, or if you're early to Twitter, or if you're early to YouTube, or if you're early to any social platform that lives in a virtual, that kind of lives, I guess we could say, in the cloud, because that's how we think about it, you can make freaking waves. So that is one thing. If you get into this early and you start to be able to dominate and kind of like make a name, in 4 or 5 years, you may be really happy.
Yes, Brian, if you give me ski goggles and a bag of psilocybin, it is game. It's game on.
And George Pate says, bro, but that was 400 was well spent for those parents to have a babysitter. This is beyond a babysitter, my G. This is like
this is
level.
totally beyond a babysitter. That is, I will give you this. The tech is really interesting, and I think potential like niche use cases are very interesting. Like I could see a booth of these at any of the major crypto conferences, especially if I'm thinking NFT NYC, where we have those wearable collectibles, like having that, being able to put that on and see your NFT on you or whatever, your AR enhanced. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that is going to be incredible. I just think it right now, the use case is too niche for me.
I'll tell you the best place for me on this.
Incredibly excited about it.
The best place for me with this is, so right now I have 3 screens. I have my laptop, 4 screens technically. I've got my laptop, a big old screen here and a big old screen here, and then my cell phone screen. And those all have different like channels like we're doing the show. I would love, to take the goggles off, clocking out of work, and it just be my laptop. And the whole time I was working here, I was working on virtual screens and then have a minimalist for peace of mind setup the rest of the day. So I do give a nod for sure that probably 2025, 2027, you're going to see the Walmart version in nearly every person's house. You'll see, and then it'll go tiers up from there. Everyone will have, HP, they do a decent, I use an HP laptop, and it's been a phenomenal workhorse. It does phenomenal gaming. It's got everything under the hood, and it's lightweight like in a MacBook Air. It's been a phenomenal laptop. We'll have those sorts of mid-tier versions of this. I think the biggest, what Apple does do is it creates vision. And even without Steve Jobs, they've waned quite a bit. And I would give credit that the vision of what this could be. I'm still waiting to see if when you put these on, if they deliver that experience that's promised in the videos and stuff. But if they do even approximate 68% of what's in those videos, you're right. Everyone will do a Me Too product. And then I'll be satisfied that I could sit down and get that cleaner home setup that has a minimalist layout when they're off, but be as busy as I want. And then more busy. Think about this. I could just keep programming screens. And we know that those screens are fantastic. George Pate. So now you got an adult babysitter. Will we be able to identify that this is a toy? Can we use it for a tool without getting distracted with the toy aspect? That's an interesting question. Someone want to grab that real quick?
Yeah, I'll take this. I saw you open your mouth, and I'll pass you the mic. I think we totally can. I think this is how I feel about my cell phone. I start to see my cell phone more as a tool and less of a toy, because I feel like many people use their cell phones as toys in the sense that they're just on social media all day.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just a tool. It's just like a hammer, right? You can build a house with a hammer. You can also kill someone really easily. So it just depends how everyone's going to use it as a toy, as a tool. And then the thing I wanted to jump on, and then Aussie, I want to hear your idea about the toy idea. The thing I think about, Grant, as well is, Crypto Bushi has already been working for years in Oculus, and that's what he has. He has multiple screens set up, and then he's still using, a keyboard and a mouse, but he has multiple screens set up, and it's a much more of a minimalist thing. And for me, someone who's kind of traveling all the time, I carry 2 laptops right now. If I could just have those goggles, which would be even smaller, I'd be through the freaking roof, right? So as we become more of like a globalized society where remote work really just becomes actually the norm, the rule, not the exception, these types of products are really, really powerful. And I think when you take into account all of what it can do, Grant, like you just said, I don't think, I guess I want to go back to the price point, because I was thinking about that a lot. Do I think the price point is going to absolutely price out 99.95% of human society? 100%. But then again, so does the iPhone 14, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we're kind of cracking, we're splitting hairs for me when we get to talk about that, because people spend money, people spend like $4,000, $5,000 to go to Taylor Swift, and they're the same ones that complain about this freaking thing. Right? Which is a tool that can allow you to do more things, in my opinion, than just that one experience. So anyways, Torben says, even though I have never worn one, it looks like it would be comfy, which is impressive. That was my last point. I had the Oculus. I don't have a lot of hair. So if I have something on my head, it has to be very comfortable or I don't wear it. You don't really see me wearing hats because sometimes they're just not comfortable. The Oculus had this thing in the back where it had these two little points, and it was how you like basically expanded and made it tighter or not.
Yeah.
And when you first put it on, it doesn't feel like anything. And I was trying to explain this to my roommate last night. But if you take, and I had like a fork, there was like a fork, we were in the kitchen, and I just kind of put it to the back of his head. But if you take some hard object and you put it to the back of your skull and you barely touch it, you like no pressure. That's how it felt. But after 30 minutes, that's what probably gave me the headache. It actually really hurt and dug in. So when you see that like that sculpted back, I guarantee they built that looking at Oculus reviews because so many people complained. And Oculus even had this thing, which I bought, which was the extended back head thing, whatever. But it was $75. So this, you're going to get it all together, not a la carte. And I actually think the price point is fair. And when you take into account all the tech it's going to bring you, and what you're doing is you're buying the experience and the access. So anyways, Aussie, the toy idea, can you be able to wear this without it just becoming a toy and actually be productive?
I think so. I think right now there's not enough toyness about it. Like there just won't be enough that you can do outside of potential productivity work that will kind of avoid that kind of rabbit hole. And I think the more that people adopt it as a work tool, the less it will kind of fall into that toy category. I think once we get cheaper and cheaper ones where, like, you know, someone won't buy their 15-year-old a pair of these, or their 13-year-old a pair of these to play around with. It's too expensive. But, you know, when there's a $300 or $500 Walmart pair, maybe. And then we'll start kind of downplaying into that toy atmosphere. But at the price point, I don't think people will degrade into toy usage, at least not right away. I think it'll take some time.
Well, you know what else will take time? Is for us to figure out what the hell is going down with these lawsuits. So if that's a fair segue.
That was a cute segue. You guys are just cute today. Cute. You guys are being cute today.
I mean, we are the Not Crypto Bros, and yes, this is big news, and we all have a hot take. But in all honesty, Coinbase, Binance, massive dip yesterday. Aussie, I want to kick off Jarrett with Aussie telling me why he thinks this is all a smokescreen. Why do you think the lawsuits of Binance and Coinbase are just a smokescreen and not actual regulation?
Well, because we've got a bill that's been jointly introduced in both the House Agriculture Committee and the Financial Services Committee that was announced on Sunday.
Okay.
Guess what? Sunday, end of day. It has now received at least partial bipartisan support on crypto regulation.
Okay.
And so before that story could hit, mainstream media and really become the conversation about crypto, we have the SEC drop, hey, we're suing Binance. And then, hey, the next day when they're supposed to have testimony from Paul Grewal at the Financial Services and House Agriculture Committee.
Wait. So we're
suing Coinbase.
Gensler cares enough to go, wait, this congressional bill might be good news for crypto. I can't let that happen. So I'm going to drop my lawsuit? Or file?
Absolutely. I think he wants to bury that story. He wants to make that disappear. Because it stops him from doing one of the pieces of the bill stops him from suing crypto companies and fining them.
Oh, so it could be a smokescreen, but it could also be trying to get ahead.
Well, it's both. Essentially, it's a smokescreen because he doesn't want people talking about it, because he wants to either wants it to fail, or he wants it to totally just fly under the radar and pass and stick a whole bunch of the old legislation that he wants in there. So he's playing two games there. It doesn't really matter which one, but he's trying to pull attention away from the bill and throw flack at crypto.
Jarrett, what do you think?
I hadn't heard that, and I wasn't aware of this bill on Sunday, but I love it. I mean, I tweeted earlier just that, like, this is just North American short-term noise, and the signal is that blockchain is being adopted globally for things far beyond just digital currencies and far beyond just financial instruments. I think that the SEC right now, and somebody made this on the Twitter space that Austin shared earlier, they made a pretty good point. They were just saying that, like, this is just about timing, right? Anything that's tied into a government agency is about timing. And like, we have the midterms coming up, and now crypto is a politicized thing where the Dems don't want it, and they're the ones that are holding office. And there are people within the White House that don't want crypto and are using crypto as like a boogeyman, And so it all seems like it's coming to a head. But I think of it similar to how I think about the debt ceiling the debt ceiling debate or conversation that was happening for the last month. It's just all noise. It's all noise. I think signal is that the bigger signal for me as someone who's a U.S. Passport holder is that the U.S., and this is what I tweeted, is falling behind, and it's now scared of innovation as opposed to learning about it, leaning into, and investing in. That's the signal. And whatever happens and plays out here, like, I don't see a way that the U.S. doesn't fall behind. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing. Because right now the U.S. is kind of like the country, the big stick, if you will, of the world. And when we come off that hill, you are left with China, you're left with Russia, and I'm not sure who else is going to fill that void. So I'm thinking now as like a security. I'm going all the way to like geopolitical security and looking at like what that looks like. Because we're just taking our foot off the eye. If the US doesn't invest in the internet in the 90s and into the 2000s, we don't have any of the FANG stocks. Our economy actually doesn't exist. So if we miss out on this round, then this go round, being crypto, being Web3, being blockchain, even AI, I dare to think what's going to happen in 20 years, because the way that we, meaning the United States, is kind of going to look at these technologies is going to be very different than the way Beijing is going to use them, right? Beijing banned crypto to then push their digital yuan, right? Russia and China already are crazy surveillance states. I'm not saying that we're not a crazy surveillance state.
Sure.
But the way that they use it to control their population right now is just far more advanced than we are. So anyways, those are my kind of ideas. That to me is the signal. This is just noise. And unfortunately, I think in a month, there'll be something else to talk about. Coinbase and Binance are going to continue to be embroiled with the SEC, with the CFTC, with whatever agency that are going to step up and put the gloves on that day. I just think the long term is actually kind of scary. And I don't really know how that's going to play out. But I do know that the Bitcoin halving is less than a year away, and all this FUD is keeping the price nice and cute. Today's episode is brought to you by Cute. So it's still under 30. Go ahead, DCA, stack sats, not financial advice, life advice.
Oh, so I totally agree that this is noise at the kind of individual level. This event is noise, but I think that the overall signal that we're seeing being sent is not noise, and the overall messaging that's going on in the US is not noise. Okay. And the outright chance of a lot of things just being driven down and driven out. I mean, do you know what's something that no one's talking about, but my co-host found while researching our show this week? A Russian bank has now set up to handle cross-border payments in crypto to avoid U.S. sanctions. And this was a bank that was previously sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department last year for their involvement in the Russian war. Guess what? We're not talking about that. And we're focusing on how Elizabeth Warren says crypto is used to launder fentanyl and is responsible for the fentanyl crisis. We're talking about meme coins, and we're talking about how with 9 out of 10 US dollars has traces of cocaine on it. Yeah. So we're more occupied with like with meme coins and the bad things that do happen in crypto, rather than actually focusing on how we can use this technology, and for the US, how to use this technology to stay in their position of power and to keep maintain their influence. They're using it to try to stick other countries in the dark ages. Talk about Pakistan and Argentina, forcing them to ban cryptos so that they can get their IMF bailouts. Where the US is going about crypto all wrong, and all it's doing is helping prop up places like Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong,
El Salvador,
Asia,
just
El
any other
Salvador.
place that's super. Aussie, I think you're so spot on. I want to just like dive into that deeper because we're playing this like, the US is still thinking about FTX and the rest of the world is thinking about how to basically get off the dollar using crypto. And I think that those two things combined push politicians and push Washington to go into fear mode, as opposed to, holy shit, we print money. Why don't we just learn about what crypto is and dive into this full on R&D and figure out how we can use this, and that to me is super scary. The larger geopolitical implications of what's happening with blockchain, if not used well. I mean, once again, we go back to the tool, right? Is it a tool? Is it a toy? Is it a weapon? It all depends in the holder and what their intentions are. And I'm weary of what's going to happen because I just think the U.S. is looking around blaming Pepe coin, looking around blaming, people using crypto to buy fentanyl. Like, come on, Liz Warren, what are you talking about?
Well, these people aren't stupid. So, I know we like to.
I mean, some of them are.
I don't think they are.
You used to have a team within the U.S. political system who was responsible for teaching your senators and your House members on what technology was and keep them up to date on technology. That got dissolved after the .com. Now you've got a ton of 80-year-olds running your Senate and running your House who don't know what Wi-Fi is and does it connect to my Wi-Fi.
I don't. Well, that particular question. So I don't know. I think that it's a degen thing in general to look at oversights like that and exacerbate that to saying these people are dumb. When I say they're not dumb, what I mean is this. We know the U.S. is playing a geopolitical game and has been for a long time. We feel like we're losing ground in global stability, but by that I really mean that's a very Americana view of our foothold on the globe. When I look at the Elizabeth Warrens, Elizabeth Warren is not an idiot. Elizabeth Warren and people like her, antagonists to crypto, they're not dumb. So my question is, I don't think they're dumb. And so when I look at this, my question is you mentioned smokescreen, and we're laughing a little bit because we think the smokescreen is within the regulatory and crypto space. But then you said something else that I think is very important. That's timing. I have to imagine that if American legislators are dragging their feet in this way or dragging out these odd battles, it does start to feel weird, meaning what else is going on that we're not paying attention to? You mentioned a few things. I asked the question, what are they trying to time when they drag this out? And for me, it's one of two things. It's either something unrelated entirely, or it's greed positioning themselves personally.
Why can't it be both?
It can be. It can be.
Okay.
It could be both. And so maybe they're timing their own investments, or maybe they're dragging their feet for their investments. But I think it's fair to conclude that I think they are losing sight of the global economic domination, and it seems like they're trying to play for the Democrats. They are playing a global domination game, as every lawmaker in America is trying to do, while they're still feeding their own personal coffers. What game outside of crypto? If they're not playing the crypto game, what game are they playing? Because they think they're trying to still maintain American dominance. They have to be assuming that they're still trying to maintain American dominance. How are the Democrats doing this versus pro-crypto people? Or how are
So-
anti-crypto people? Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to first say before I come on to that, because I think that's a really great point. Like, what are they timing? If they are stalling, if it is taking Gary Gensler 63,000 years to define what a security is, why? Why
Sure.
does that take so long? The thing I want to hit on is something that Aussie brought up. I think that there can be really intelligent people like Liz Warren, but I think she can also be uber ill-informed. And I think informed is different from intelligence. I've known many very intelligent people, but they are not informed. Charlie Munger, you could argue, is a very intelligent investor. I don't think he's had very strong conversations about Bitcoin with people who actually can explain it to him in a way that might even at least arouse his curiosity, right? So I think Liz Warren, and I mean, once again, we're in such a silo. If you're listening to this conversation, you are in a silo, right?
Sure.
Most of the people I talk to, if I'm like, do you want dollars or do you want Bitcoin? They're going to take dollars, right?
Sure.
Even as a long-term hedge against inflation or whatever it is. So I do think that there is an information gap. There's an insight gap that really is lacking in politicians. And I totally hear what Aussie's saying. You know, most of the politicians in the United States have zero idea about technology, don't understand network effects, you know, and that's why like Loomis is such a shining light, because she's like in crypto, she's taken the time to learn about it, and you know she's kind of gone all in on it in some sense. Like that's part of her platform. So now getting back to the Democrats and the Republicans, I really don't actually understand. I don't understand why they have it as a punching bag between the two, because I don't actually get what they're gaining.
It's odd.
It's a really odd thing, and I think and I'm not sure if people have like explained it, and somehow I got there really quick today in the conversation, but for me, it's a national security issue.
Yeah.
If we're not ahead on crypto.
Read Soft War. Did
you read it?
War. I've read some of it. I haven't finished it, but read Soft War. This is Jason Lowell's point about Bitcoin mining, and everything. He is the head of cryptocurrency at Space Force in the US. And his book Software is that exact argument, that not being involved in cryptocurrency is a threat to national security. And he says that that is the most valid argument to destroy any legislation against crypto in the US, because it would be considered a threat to national security.
Yeah, and he's the guy I believe I heard talk about this a couple years ago, before this book even came out. And his whole thing was like, look, the currencies are going to die, right? And what you're going to be left with is Bitcoin. And people who are going to be able to harness that to build on that layer of trust and also have that in their treasuries, those countries are the countries that are going to just really thrive. And so not learning about it, not investing in it, not having hash rate, not having mining power, all of the things is really setting us apart. And if we don't, it's setting those who don't take the time to learn about it apart. And I think that that is one of the best arguments that is probably out there for a hard money, right? Right now we have fiat money, which is unsound money, or it's not hard money. And that we know is just going to lead to pain. It's going to make the rich richer, the poor poorer. Inflation is going to affect everyone. You know, eventually the $3,500 goggles in 5 years are going to seem cheap. So that's the fiat game, right? The amount of money that we've printed, even since like 2000, is stupid. A stupid amount of money, you know? So for me, I think that's one of the biggest arguments. Allison says people in authority are generally older and don't like change and new things. Easier to reject everything new. Shout out to the pod I did with Allison. It came out this week. Allison, I'm dubbing her the curiosity leader of Web3 and crypto. Web 2, we had thought leaders. I think in Web 3, we're going to have curiosity leaders. Grant, I shout you out in that, talking about how, you know, in the omniscience age,
yes,
your thoughts and your, you know, those things are okay, but it's the curiosity, and the part of curiosity, and this is something that Allison has in droves, is its action. It's not just thinking about it. That's the thought. It's thinking about it and then putting it into action and then iterating. And that's what Allison does. So anyway, shout out to Allison. But anyways, we're not being curious. We need to lead with our curiosity when it comes to crypto and not shut it down. And I just come back to that intelligence versus informed. I do think Liz Warren is uber intelligent, right?
Yeah.
If she were the Democratic, you know, nominee, I'd probably vote for her because I think she's very, very well spoken on a myriad of issues. But when it comes to crypto, I don't think she's had high level conversations. At least that's a story in my head because the stuff she says is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, you think, Liz Warren, that people are buying more fentanyl in Massachusetts and New Hampshire with crypto than they are with US dollars in cash? You're
or
out of your freaking
prostitution
mind,
rings, or
lady.
human trafficking, or cocaine, or name
Or
a
any of
thing.
it. You think they're at the strip club scanning QR codes for Dogecoin?
You know,
what are
like
we doing?
my take is this: like, I think we should actually go to these leaders, these voices who are anti-crypto, and we need to tell them, you know how weak this argument is. At least let me rewrite your argument to give you a better argument that's more informed, and in the process, educate them on why there are better arguments than like fentanyl on Bitcoin. We're talking Silk Road shit. Okay, let's start with your black budget for the Persian Gulf Wars. Like, could we just start there? Like, where did that money go? What was your thought, Aussie?
I mean, I want to say that that's a conversation you could have, but you can't. I mean, the space that I was on. A guy who's like got at least some association with Warren because he kept name dropping her during the Twitter space, just absolutely did not want to hear it. He called banks like Silvergate and Signature Banks scams, frauds, bad apples, and any negative thing you could hear in the book. When from everything that we know about Signature, there was nothing wrong with Signature when they shut it down. They shut it down because of its association with crypto. So
Its books weren't upside down?
what? No, according to everything that's public knowledge, its books weren't upside down.
Really?
New York just shut it down because of its association with crypto.
Really?
So at least that's the understanding. So I don't think some of them have made their opinions, have already formed their opinions. They don't want to hear it.
Well, no,
They
you're
don't
right.
care.
You're right. And, you know, I'm being facetious when I say we need to give them better arguments, but like they have to hear themselves. I mean, this is what I mean about intelligent people. And I don't know, we're talking about politicians, but we're also talking about our neighbors. Like, you're smarter than this. You know what? You're not even a good opponent to debate this stuff. Let me feed you an argument, and then we'll have a real dialogue because your arguments are so weak. So I agree with you. They won't hear it, but they have to hear themselves. It's just weird when you say these weird one-liners that don't land home. And is the average American truly a person of Walmart who's not a critical thinker, and they don't hear these sound bites and think that's a ridiculous sentence? I literally went and bought meth this afternoon, and it wasn't with Bitcoin. They have to at least, think that. What you're saying, Jared?
Yeah, I didn't want to cut you off, but it's like, I don't think they know what they don't know what they don't know, and there are very few people on the planet that are crypto literate. And so when Warren comes out and says, "Oh, they're buying crypto with fentanyl," well, what's the boogeyman in the Northeast and in many, many parts of America right now? It is fentanyl. It is heroin. It is killing people. It's a silent killer. No one talks about it. People die a lot. It affects young people, and when they say, "Oh yeah, well, people are buying it with crypto," and it's young people, they're like, "Oh yeah, well, they're the digital age, so they must be using crypto on the internet to buy their fentanyl."
Oh yeah.
It's easier for the people that actually vote in the United States, which are older people, primarily, to be like, "Oh yeah, so." Oh yeah,
to feel out of the loop and maybe go, well, even though I bought meth with cash, I'm sure that I'm not nearly as bad as all these people who are doing all this mess with all this Bitcoin thing. Yeah, I could imagine that.
I'm just saying, I think that they don't know what they don't know, so they hear this soundbite, and I don't think they can question it. There are some things I hear about, and I just don't know about those particular things, And
Which
somebody
is why
who's
the
a
age of
subject
the curious is important because
exactly.
The age of the curious is super important, and I'm glad that you and Allison got to that on your podcast because you correlated this to the omniscience age, which is what I'm titling the age we're in, and I think that's right because in an age of omniscience, you can't claim to have answers. What do I mean by that? I mean, if everything is Googleable or ChatGPTable, you can fact check someone before they finish their sentence. And so instead of thinking you have answers, to literally pose everything with a sincere curiosity. I wonder if really Bitcoin represents a significant amount of fentanyl purchases, and I can just ask and check. I can just check, but I think you're right. The technology has surpassed the human, because I look left and right of me, and that's not how the average person sitting in the pickup line at their student's school is actually operating. Or the average guy I see at the bar trying to pick up a girl, he's not thinking about fact checking anything. So you're probably right. Not that people are NPCs. I think that's kind of totally derogatory, but they sure act like it sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I just think in the argument, in the conversation, Aussie, were you going to go? Please go.
I was gonna bring something, because we talked about you don't know what you don't know, and so I want to bring this conversation to things that people might not know that they don't know.
Go for it.
So you, Jarrett, you just said you didn't know about the bill that was introduced on Sunday. Mm-hmm. I'm sure because everyone's talking about Coinbase and talking about Binance, that no one's heard about some of the requirements that they're talking about in the legislation to define whether or not something is a security or a commodity. And they've got a framework. So this is the Republicans introduced this to start a conversation, to kickstart a conversation. Okay. And so they also set up a framework where something can transition from being a security to a commodity over 3 years. So very, very, very interesting.
What? How does that even work? My mind's blown.
So by achieving true decentralization. So
that's actually pretty mature.
It is
really
it's
mature,
actually a very, very mature conversation. So they're talking about no one owning more than 20% of the supply. No entity or person owning more than 20% of the circulating supply.
I wonder how they
direction hit.
How did they land on that number? Do you have any idea, Ossie?
It has to do with on share. So with shares for private equity, if anyone owns more than 10% of the share of shares, has to be disclosures made.
Got you.
So why 20%? I think they kind of I think that number was kind of okay. Maybe 10% is too little. We'll make it 20%.
That's interesting. That is a very mature mechanism.
I've never heard
it is a
that.
very mature mechanism.
And so that's wild. And so like the tokenomics or the incentivizations is you could show up and have to file SEC securities laws for the first 3 years. But if you can prove, and I don't know who maybe starts a project and says, okay, we'll either mint or distribute or build out nodes or something to achieve true decentralization in 3 years or more, right? Like you
it's 3 years. It's 3 years.
Meaning that's not a cap. Like you have to do it within 3 years. They're saying you can't switch status before 3 years, no matter what. To your knowledge.
No, I think you've got 3 years.
Oh, and after that, you're stuck as a security.
Yeah.
To your knowledge. Yeah.
At least to my knowledge, to my understanding of the rules. They're also, you can't have a directing party that's leading so you can't have a CEO of Cardano. Like Charles Hoskinson, I've been picking on Cardano a lot, but Charles Hoskinson would have to disappear. He could not be CEO of Cardano. The whole Cardano Foundation would need to be dissolved. It would have to, within those 3 years, it would have to be independent developers slowly building the ecosystem, not one lead organization. Polygon Labs would have to disappear. Any of those foundations or kind of lead dev teams would have to disappear.
Is Charles Hoskins the CEO of Cardano?
Pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure that's. I don't know if that's his official title, but it's something along those lines.
Interesting. And what the interesting thing about this is, how does a decentralized thing prove it's decentralized once it's decentralized if there's no representative?
essentially, I think that they're able to, like, the people that initially launched it would have to go through this process, and at the end of the process, prove that they've now relinquished all of or the majority of the authority. And so, what we're seeing with Solana and all of the coins, like, I mean, let's talk about the 61 tokens that have now officially been at least named by the SEC as securities, which, although avoids listing three major tokens: ETH, AVAX, and Doge.
I thought AVAX was mentioned. Am I wrong?
It wasn't.
Wow.
It has not been mentioned. So ETH, Doge, and AVAX are the main stuff within the top 10 and the top 20, other than Tether, that has not been named. And we can go down the rabbit hole of if tomorrow we hear about Tether.
Do you think tomorrow Tether's coming?
I mean, it's they seem to like to drop bomb after bomb, and the last thing that they haven't gone after, kind of for the US, you've attacked the main exchanges. They've attacked USDC when they attacked when they went after bank. They haven't, okay, Brian, they haven't mentioned XRP in these filings, but XRP is in court, so I have included it in the list.
And I think that they will. Here's my chief degen officer, not financial advice, pseudo prediction. I think of all the cryptos that will actually IPO and play super nice with the SEC, I'm calling Ripple. I'm calling them IPO.
You had that article. You said that they were looking into that.
The conjecture is because someone tracked a lot of their meetings with investment advisement firms or IPO firms, basically. It's unclear if they were hunting them for business and contracts or if they were hunting them to help them IPO. But it is not as nicely as they have historically tried to play in the banking system. And once the SEC clears, I think you're going to hear an entirely different tune where they will absolutely discuss IPO.
How would that work? Because XRP would be the thing that would IPO, right? Those are the shares. Like, how? I just don't understand how that works.
Maybe not.
Yes, I've always heard. So Ripple was the second thing I ever bought into, and I'm OG Ripple. And the thing I heard long ago was that when you talk about XRP, you maybe shouldn't talk about Ripple and vice versa because of how different they may split over the long term.
Correct.
Ripple still wants to be a financial player, and XRP is just kind of their game token essentially.
Sure.
But like I could see them long term abandoning XRP, IPOing with something else, having just common shares, and then using the blockchain in a different way. So I don't know. Being an XRP holder is interesting.
Maybe like I was thinking through like some burn mechanisms, and you burn it in exchange for stock. You know, like there's like an exchange program, or it might actually still be integral, but they're still playing nice with the SEC. And by issuing a separate thing called a Ripple stock, they're drawing the ire, attention, and audit to something other than the token. And that's like a deep chess play, right? Which most crypto companies don't want to play because they're like, my token. It's like, well, why don't you play a deep game? Join the SEC, issue stock, make them focus on the stock, and then the token becomes a different component of the company. And it kind of takes their attention off of how staking is happening and airdrops are happening and makes them focus on the actual regulatory body and say, no, we're playing nice. I don't know why they haven't played that game. I'm sure I know I'm oversimplifying that. Yeah. But also, I want to go back to this. Were there any other standout mechanisms in the bill that really caught your eye? Because that one is kind of groundbreaking already. But was there anything else?
I mean, that's the main stuff that I've heard that I've seen. We've still not seen all of the details from the bill because it was meant to kickstart conversation. It's not a finalized bill.
What, Jared?
It's meant to kickstart conversation. Yeah, it's like when you're on a first date and like, you know, your dating app tells you to ask for the favorite color. I mean, this is just such bullshit. They spend hours and hours and hours crafting a bill just so it can be a starting point.
That I just may or may not see the floor. Yeah.
Our entire legislation process is just an absolute joke. and it's really starting to hinder. So sorry, Aussie, you're in your backswing there.
No, I was thinking about this, and it's just I totally agree. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it is setting the foot, like setting the piece for a ground war between the CFTC and the SEC.
What is the CFTC?
The Commodities Trading Commission.
The Commodities and Futures, right? Trading Commission or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they divide the powers equally between the CFTC and the SEC, depending on whether the crypto is a commodity or a security. And guess what that means? They're going to fight on who legislates exchanges, who's going to be responsible, who's going to be responsible for what, and what falls under whose jurisdiction. And so, the Binance suit from the SEC comes 3 months after the CFTC suit against Binance for at least similar charges, not identical, but similar charges. And so the SEC is trying to stake that claim, but it also forces good faith in that you can't pursue people for things that they did in the past while we figure this out. And so it would protect a lot of crypto companies from kind of getting out of control.
So I would like to, I have a motion. I would like to ask that we do shout outs and we leave this as chapter 1, because I know by our Friday show, we're going to have more information on both of these lawsuits. Other information will come out. Brian Armstrong had a great tweet today. We're going to have more tweets to be able to kind of look at and dissect and understand who the players are. Because this is probably some of the biggest information I think we've ever covered on the show. How does that sound, guys?
I love it. I love it. Go ahead. Or do you want me to start?
Go. Start with your shout out.
My shout out is a shout out to Charles Hoskinson of Cardano, bitches. And here's why. Charles Hoskinson is actually the president of IOHK, Input Output, not the Cardano Foundation. The largest whale in all of Cardano only owns 16% of Cardano ADA, which would pass muster already for this definition, if this definition stands, of a commodity, which is quite interesting. And this is partly why I love Cardano is they've been truly decentralized for a long, long time. In terms of these terms. Now, who's doing the development? Cardano Foundation, and who controls that? So there's a different mechanism going on. But my shout out is to Cardano and Cardanans for staying true to the message in spite of these mother appers. Because I'm just messing around.
Well, they're still considered a security according to the SEC.
Currently.
So,
but that has to go to court, and they have to duke that out. So that's my shout out.
Aussie, what do you got?
I'm gonna shout out everybody that's shown up today. Like, thank you for showing up and listening to us, and giving us some good laughs today. And I'm gonna shout out that 6-hour Twitter space that I was in earlier.
Oh my gosh!
Shout out to all those. There was 20,000 people at peak in that Twitter space. Over 20,000 people in that Twitter space at peak. So shout out to all those people that were trying to stay in the know.
For some reason, this comment didn't come through from Brian Naughton, so I pasted it here, just FYI, saying that Americans don't know about crypto.
Yeah, but I think owning crypto doesn't mean you know about crypto. I think that's a huge difference. So, and most people don't understand that there's commodity and security. So there's a lot of things at play here. My shout out is for anyone that's still here, anyone that's still listening to crypto and Web3. I've had a lot of conversations recently. We've talked about it here. People are just leaving. People are tired. I think people over emotionally invest in the short term and don't do this the same in the long term. And this is a long play. This is still so early. In 10 years, maybe I'll stop saying it's early. We'll see though. But shout out to anyone who's still here, who's just learning and trying to stay optimistic and curious and positive, because tech waits for no one. So it's not going to be the US. We're gonna see what's going to happen. So we will be back. And Grant, remind me of the time. I think it's at 10
10 a.m. We're
a.m.
scheduled for
Eastern.
10 a.m. We're trying to nail that down for everyone's
10 a.m.
consistency.
Eastern time on Friday. And if not, see us at this time, which is 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesdays. Find us on YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Not Crypto Bros. Reach out. We love hearing from people. And we will see you on Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time.
Thanks so much.